place that light is afraid to touch, where the monsters beneath your bed and hiding behind your fear refuse to travel. Do you dare? Is your mind capable of the sights you will see? Is your body prepared for the sounds you will hear? Is your spirit up to the challenge of what you soon may feel? If so, have a seat. This is the Ghoul Kids Table.
Greetings, fellow insomniacs, and welcome to the table. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ghoul Kids Table podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. I'm your host. My name is Chunky Larry, and joining me this week, and for the next couple of weeks at least, is somebody who wants to sit in and help in the stay of Roar Lee. And I couldn't think of a better person to hang out with for at least the next couple of weeks and talk about the Scream franchise with. We last week discussed the top 5 best kills of the Scream franchise. He is a knowledgeable person on the franchise and a good friend of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorite people on TikTok, Mr. Andrew Horror. How you doing, my man?
Hi, I'm doing fantastic faces. Get it? It's this ghost face mask is fantastic faces. All right. Anyway, it's been fun. I'll see you guys later.
I just said he's one of the funniest guys I know.
and then I pull that out. I'd like to formally apologize.
Anywho, we are going to be discussing the Scream franchise in its entirety in a episode by episode look at the films from the beginning to the most recent film, Scream 6, which means that before all is said and done, I will have watched Scream 6. But today, because we record in advance, and that's neither here nor there. But today on both Instagram and TikTok, our friend Scott from the You Run podcast, he made a declaration that if Stu Macher were not in Scream 6, he would roll around in mouse traps. And he rolled around in mouse traps not once, but fucking twice, dude. He went live on Instagram. Like, I thought he would like simul live or something. No. This motherfucker on 2 separate fucking occasions.
Oh my God.
like, come on, you gotta have another phone. what are we fucking doing here? None of your friends like you enough that you're willing to share your fucking login information on their phone for just a little bit of time, so you don't have to do this more than once.
Oh my God.
Maybe it's a British thing. Who fucking knows? But spoiler alert for a film that I still haven't seen. Stu Macher is still very much dead.
Yep.
But before we get into the film, we've got to pull up a IMDb on 1996's Scream. And the IMDb for Scream says as follows. Well, of course it doesn't say as follows because I have to find one. Should have had that ready. Next episode. All right, here we go. A year after the murder of her mother, a teenage girl is terrorized by a new killer who targets the girl and her friends by using horror films as a part of a deadly game. Ooh. This is one of the first things that Kevin Williamson did, correct? You know a lot more about Kevin Williamson than I do.
I believe he wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer before Scream, but I think that this is the first thing that like he wrote that got made.
Mm. And so I think before, and we'll, I'm sure, get into this as we go through the series, but before we get going, we should talk about the writing style of Kevin Williamson because he has a very on brand style when it comes to writing. It feels very television.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he doesn't write cinematically. I think that uh he writes for a smaller screen. It's still like melodramas that people can invest in their time, but he does not write cinematically. And so it's a very kind of reserved style that is then by translation had to be adapted in a visual sense. And so what I mean by that is his stuff is dialogue heavy. It's not really action heavy. There's action that takes place in it, but it's primarily dialogue. And I just I I think it's something that specifically when this film is released in 1996, this is a point in time where we are now post Clerks and Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. This is the era of time that we inhabit where everything is referential. And so then inevitably the horror genre has to catch up with that and be referential to the horror genre. And so it hits kind of at a perfect time for a horror in the sense that everything around it was already kind of creating that atmosphere in terms of the way that the dialogue is portrayed in that film. And I think of all of the Scream films, this is probably the best example of that dialogue working.
Oh, for sure. For
But
sure.
uh we talked about it a little bit on last week's episode, but what are your earliest experiences of the Scream franchise?
Um, I told the story about the first time I watched it, even though I would have been 5 or 6 because it would have been late 97 that it came out on VHS.
Mm,
So yeah, I remember we rented it from Blockbuster because
made
we
it a
went to
blockbuster
Blockbuster
night.
back then. We sure did. And um it was it's so weird. I was so young, but I was already a horror fan at that point. I had already been watching like Monster Vision. I've already been watching horror movies with my dad. He was really into horror and he would, let me watch shit that I was way too young to be watching. But
Of course.
I just remember like kind of being like I want to say blown away, even though I was just really young. So it probably wasn't that big, but like watching this movie and then hearing them talk about these other movies that I love, these other horror movies that I love, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. It was like I had never seen anything like that before. Um, it was something special. And even though I was so young, I knew it was something special. And it became like we rented it so many times that at some point it would have been smarter for my parents to just buy the movie.
Yeah.
And eventually they did. And then I just like it was one of those movies that I just rewatched all the time. And I remember, oh, well, maybe we'll talk about that in Scream too. But I was gonna say I remember that on the VHS for Scream, the trailer for Scream 2 was
Yeah.
before it. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
the first time you watch it, it's got Dewey and Randy and Gail and Sydney in the trailer. It's like, well, I guess they
Oh,
survive.
oh, I thought it had the teaser trailer that they did
Does it? Okay.
with Randy and Dewey, where they're talking
Yeah,
about
okay.
who
So
they.
it does. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay. But so then then you know that Randy and Dewey survive at least,
Yeah,
which
but
I mean, I
because
guess.
I remember because it was they premiered that trailer on pay-per-view. So
Oh,
that was because that was the selling point of the pay-per-view, and they had like the first look at Scream 2. It is like, yeah, because so when this movie came out in 1996, I was 15 years old. I went and saw it for the first time with my mom in the movie theater, and it was a fucking experience. So much so that because they played movies for a long time in that period of time,
yeah.
and so they would, it played in main theaters for December to, I want to say, March or June, something like that,
Bam.
right? And but then it hit the dollar theaters over the course of the summer, or where it was like a couple bucks you could go see it. I saw this fucking movie 13 fucking times in the theater. I all right, I was 15 years old and I had a live-in girlfriend at the time, and there was some oral activity that took place in the movie theater during one of those situations. So like when you tell me, oh yeah, I was like 5 years old, I was still watching like fucking Scooby Doo.
I was.
It's like, dude, I was getting blown. I was getting fucking blowjobs, kid. What are you talking about? It's so fucked up. It's like, oh shit, I'm gonna die soon.
Oh my
Hello, darkness, my old friend. This movie's almost 30 years old.
That's wild.
It's fucking crazy to think that this movie's almost 30. That I've been, doing things for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 things, unspeakable acts.
Oh
So
goodness.
I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Drew Barrymore element of this fucking film,
Of
because
course.
uh, you know again, I was in the right fucking age range for this movie. I was a fucking shitty ass kid, 15-year-old horror fan, and I was obsessing over things like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween, and all of the shit that like I'd not really kind of explored Italian horror or Japanese horror or any of that shit. It was all kind of the bread and butter American slasher for me. So that's what this is paying homage to. So it was, but it was also speaking to that kind of, you know, generation that as a 15-year-old you aspire to be, because in the MTV era, especially when you're a teenager, tween to teenager, you're not looking at the people that are your age, you're looking at the people that are a couple of years older than you. That's
Yeah.
those are the guys that go to the party with the senior girls and all that shit. So uh it's just like, so that's who they're speaking to. They're not speaking to actual 20-year-olds. They're speaking to people my age. And so I think that this film ages tremendously for that effect, and in an interesting way, in the sense that it speaks to new 15-year-olds, because I don't feel as if some of the styles have kind of floundered or whatever the fuck, but there's still that cool factor to it, because I still hear young people talking about it like it's a cool thing, and that shit's wild to me. um Especially when you look at like TikTok. But I was talking about Drew Barrymore, and I kind of wandered off the path. But Drew Barrymore, when this came out, this was, the equivalent of Psycho. And, it is the Psycho beginning, because you expect this established star to just be kind of a mainstay character, and this being just kind of a really off kilter way to start the story, but you don't expect her to fucking die.
Yeah.
and when they do that, when the knife goes in her chest, and she's running away and she gets stabbed in the chest, you still think that there's somehow some way she's going to escape that when you're initially watching it, because it's fucking Drew Barrymore. But no, no. And then it's like, okay, well, fucking all bets are off, fucking game on, anybody can fucking get it. And I think that's a really important precedent to set in this first movie. But it ultimately becomes formulaic, that opening kill scene, and to the point now that if you see somebody in the opening of the film, you just assume that they're dead.
Yeah.
So, but your thoughts on the Drew Barrymore kill?
Ooh. I so the first time I watched it, like I said, I was 5, 6, whatever. I wasn't really like in tune with who Drew Barrymore was. Like I knew her from probably E.T. Maybe what else? Like I would have maybe Firestarter. I might have watched Firestarter that young. But I know my mom that was one of the reasons she wanted to watch the movie, because she doesn't really care for horror. She was like, okay, this has got Drew Barrymore in it. I'll watch it with you guys. Me and my sisters would watch horror movies, and my mom would just do. But no, we could watch it in one of our rooms, and she was like, no, you guys can watch that one downstairs because it's got Drew Barrymore in it. And I wish I could remember like her reaction when she, died and didn't show up in the rest of the movie. But I think it's genius, kind of, because Drew, like, they did really market it, as much as I can remember, and like looking back on stuff, as it starring Drew Barrymore. She's on the poster, even though some people don't think that the poster with the eyes and the mouth is Drew Barrymore, but it is. I just It's so, and that was her idea too. That was Drew Barrymore's idea, because she was supposed to play Sydney.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think you guys should fucking kill me off in the beginning. And that's also, that's why Wes
that she
Craven.
wanted to, really get killed off, or do you think that she just didn't want to do the movie?
I think she was okay with the like 5 days of shooting that she had to do. And she, I think that was a big part of it. She didn't want to be in the rest of the movie.
Because here's the thing. I've tried to play this movie with Drew Barrymore in the Sydney role, and it just doesn't work.
I couldn't see it.
I've really and now I think that the casting might have been different for some of those actors had Drew Barrymore been cast, because people would have had to have worked off of her. And I think that also the implication that, Stu and Casey had dated, I don't see Matthew Lillard and Drew Barrymore working well together in terms of, just looks and screen personality. I don't see it.
Yeah.
So, seeing it as, Sydney and Stu, I wouldn't see it either. It just doesn't jive. I think that, that was a happy accident for everybody involved, because Nev Campbell in the role of Sidney Prescott inevitably became what that franchise is.
Yeah.
And, I know that she's not in this new film, but there's something to be said about those films kind of having an identity around her more than Ghostface. because the ghost face is, just somebody in a costume every single time, but she's always the constant.
Yeah, she's the constant. Yep.
So I don't know. That's really interesting, and I don't think you would have gotten that with Drew Barrymore.
I don't think so either. I couldn't even imagine her in Scream 2
Yeah,
or 4. So
but like, there's this weird kismet quality to this first film, where everything seems to make sense, and I don't think that that's per se the genius of Wes Craven. I don't think that it's the brilliant writing of Kevin Williamson. I think it's just a confluence of different things that happened at one given time. It being the right time for this movie to come out, the right cast, the right script, the right director who carried this kind of weight cinematically that that any other director wouldn't necessarily have carried, short of getting like a Sam Raimi or a John Carpenter. But it would not have worked. It would not have worked with John Carpenter. If John Carpenter were to have directed Scream, it would have looked totally different. It would not have fit the energy of the generation. And Craven, to his benefit and to his detriment, is a guy that plays go along guy a lot, I think, cinematically, in the sense that in pretty much all of his work, he's just there to do a job. And, he has something to say in certain situations, but for the most part, I don't feel like he has really anything to say. You know what I mean? Like where you look at it like a John Carpenter, he has something he wants to say. When he makes a
yeah.
movie, he has something that he wants to say. David Cronenberg, he has something that he wants to say. When Wes Craven makes a movie, a lot of the times it's just him doing a job, especially in the latter part of his career. You look at the movies that he made, Curse, My Soul to Take, Red Eye, all these fucking movies. He didn't really have anything to say. He was just making a movie.
Right.
So I think that, the caveat of him having this style already, where people are recognizing Wes Craven with, horror because of Nightmare on Elm Street, because of Shocker, because of Serpent and the Rainbow, because of People Under the Stairs. He's built that persona enough that he could essentially make, a hired gun job, and his name recognition alone will carry enough weight that people will care. Feelings,
Yeah.
thoughts. If I'm saying something that you think is wrong, by all means.
Oh no, I totally agree. I mean, I think anybody that knows me knows how much I love Wes Craven. Okay. Um, got the shirt on. I know people listening can't see it, but I'm wearing a Wes Craven shirt. But um, I totally agree, especially especially the one you named, like Red Eye. And even though I love Red Eye, I even like My Soul to Take. I know people hate on it. I think it's a decent movie. It's not terrible. Um, it's all. I don't think he wrote any of those.
No.
He hasn't wrote as that many movies that he directed. Like,
Yeah.
I think especially once we get past New Nightmare, it's like, from Scream on, I feel like they were written by somebody else. And what I love about Wes Craven is take somebody's work, writing, and he can make it great because he's fucking Wes Craven. Like you said, like, yeah, somebody like John Carpenter directed him, it would just be so different. I couldn't even imagine Scream directed by John Carpenter, or who else was like. I know there were a bunch of people that were in talk to direct Scream. Maybe Rodriguez.
You really look at, the directors of his particular, ilk, his particular generation of, you
Yeah.
know, those other guys, John Landis, you could even throw Clive Barker in there if you
Oh,
wanted. None of those guys would have just done the job like Wes Craven
yeah.
did the job.
Completely agree
So
with that.
there's something to say about his lack of ego
Yeah,
that
a
makes,
really
you know what I'm saying?
that's a
Like,
yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think all these other directors have kind of a very unique style to them, where if you watch one of their movies, you can kind of pick out like, I'm watching a John movie, I'm watching a Barker movie.
uh,
Wes Craven movies are kind of just like, I mean, he has a style and he has, but it's not over. Not to say directors are over stylizing their movies or anything. I love all these directors we're talking about, but it's just, I forgot where I was going with that. But I completely agree. Yeah, Wes Craven came in and did the job, but he fucking didn't overdo it. He I don't know. He doesn't really. I don't know how to put one of the words.
so let's
Basically,
talk
what
about
you said.
let's talk
I
about
completely with you.
let's talk about Billy and Stu, because Billy and Stu have a very interesting dynamic. To me, um, you see it in that first scene where they introduce all of the kids, which usually in and so this is another thing that I thought was really fucking genius about this first fucking movie, is that the idea is that they're making a self-aware version of the 80s horror slasher. So they get an 80s horror slasher director,
Mhm.
and they do a lot of the tropes of an 80s horror slasher. So having the mass introduction scene, it works that template, that formula. But they did something really interesting in it, in the sense that they used it as a way to convey the relationships through the different characters. So you're able to pick up, um, obviously, that Randy is in love with Sydney, and that he's, kind of like performing to get her attention. Um, you see that Tatum is the defensive big sister character for Sydney. You get the relationship with Billy and Sydney, but you, more than any of that, you get to see the relationship with Billy and Stu. And there's this interaction that they have where, Stu, when Nev said, or when Sydney says, "How can you gut someone?" He leans in, he's like, "You take a knife and you slit him from groin to sternum." But there's this really cold look that Billy gives Stu, and it's showing their relationship. And they have this relationship where Stu is Billy's lackey,
Yeah,
and there's this, uh head lion, lesser lion kind of thing that they've got going on. And when he says, "I didn't kill her," and Billy says, "Nobody said you did," again, it's, you know it's showing it without showing it. And then in the video store scene, when Randy is fucking accosted by Billy, Stu reaches up behind him, puts him in a fucking headlock, basically, or a
yeah,
full Nelson. And so he's leaning in and talking in his ear as Billy is threatening him, but he's playing kind of the gesture follow along to Billy's very stern. And so he's kind of a goof, but Billy is very serious. And so you hear that in the performance of Ghostface. That performance is brilliant to me. The phone voice, like there's so much character in that first film that is tried to be replicated in the latter films, but you hear it more in the first one, where you can kind of recognize who is which character. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as far as like the Ghostface thing goes, specifically in the first one, there's always points where it's like it almost sounds like you can tell, like especially when it's supposed to be Billy. I think I can't remember if we talked about this on that last episode or not, but it might have been something else. But
We were
the
on live.
like the oh yeah, okay, sorry everybody. The first phone call to Casey, it just every time it's Billy. That's Billy
Yeah.
to me. That's what, like, it has his inflection. I don't know if that's what they were going for, or if it was just a happy coincidence, accident. Um, but yeah, my favorite Roger performance, and lines and all that stuff is this first movie. And the dynamics between Stu and Billy, we also don't really get that anymore after this movie with the killers.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I can't even think of a movie after this where we even see the killers, the two killers, one killer and one of them, like interact with each other as much as Billy and Stu did in this movie. And I don't
4.
know if that's like a in four. Okay. Oh yeah.
We'll get there.
All right. We'll get there. That shows how much I think about Scream 4. But
We'll get there.
I just love it. I think my favorite one of my favorite scenes in this movie is that video store scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so Matthew Lillard's performance in that scene alone is so great. And then it's like they're two opposites kind of, when Stu's over here making jokes and making faces and shit at Randy, and then Billy comes over and he's all sullen and fucking serious. And I just love it so much. And honestly, I don't know how that scene doesn't just give it away. It might for
Exactly.
people now, but
But I think that the reason that it doesn't is because at that point there isn't a lot of examples of multiple killers
all right,
in these
yeah,
slasher films.
because you don't know it's two. And also they did the thing where Billy got arrested,
Mm-hmm.
and then Billy gets killed later.
It's done very well, and so I refer to this as an American giallo. Now, it's very much predicated on a who done it. It's got the violent elements to it, and you're able to see the pieces. And this is an important thing to me in terms of giallos, is on second viewings you should be able to see the little pieces that they put out there for you, and they have that
Yeah,
in this.
yeah, and I
And
think I can't
go
even
ahead.
think of other one. I know we're only talking about Scream, but like it's just this first movie is just so magical to me. It's like I can't think of any points in the other films where it it's like that.
Yeah,
And maybe I'm just not remembering correctly, but yeah, it is so funny to go back and watch it and just be like, how did I not know? Like, even though I've always known, like, since I was 5 years old, but still, it wasn't like a mind-blowing thing when I was 5. But yeah, that's what a great movie, a great whodunit or mystery or a movie with a twist ending is, that you can go back and watch it and see all the things that put the pieces into and then gives you that full puzzle at the end. Metaphor.
yeah.
I'm good with
I,
metaphors.
I really, really fucking love that. And I also really love the adoration that's conveyed kind of throughout the film for the horror genre.
Yeah.
That's something that I think rings more true in this one than in any of the other fucking Scream
Oh,
films. Is
absolutely.
that there's such a care that's put to, you know, the idea of fandom in this first film, you know, and it's largely on the back of Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, who is incredible in this fucking movie. He is The movie could be about Randy and I would fucking love it. And
Oh,
that's again another difference I think that they have in this film as opposed to any of the other films, is that they have a character that really represents the horror fan existing in one of these films. And you know, they're going to come off a little nervous because they feel they're living a horror film.
yeah.
and and he has this manic energy that I think just absolutely complements the very serious nature of all of the violence. You know, and Craven has tried to do that through the course of his films, where he blends this kind of sense of comedy to these horrific moments. And I think that of all of the films that he's done, this probably hits that mark better than any of the other ones.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
And again, I feel like a lot of that is on the back of Jamie Kennedy, but it's also on the back of David Arquette,
Oh,
who
yeah.
is incredible as fucking Dewey. There's this moment, and I love it every time I see it. It's after Sydney is at the house with Tatum, and they get the call, and he comes out in his underwear. He gets on the phone. Hello.
Yeah.
Nobody's there. It's like I remember the first time seeing that in the theater and how I just lost my shit because it's just like, what are you doing, bro? So that scene, and what did mama tell you? When I wear
Yeah.
this badge, you treat me like a man of the law.
I love it.
He's so great in this fucking movie, and there's an earnestness to his performance as Dewey and his relationship with Gale Weathers, and Gale Weathers in this film works better than she works in any of the other films, because she's, you know, not having to deal with the encumbered nature of her character already going through this arc. And that's the problem that she has in the other films, is she's already had this arc, and so then now you have to make her compelling after she's already supposedly out of this character that is actually enjoyable. um but the relationship with Gale and Sydney, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, with Sydney. I think this is just going to be all down the board. In this movie, it's better than every other movie.
Yeah, across the board.
Across the board. I love their relationship and kind of the arc that it takes, because, you know, you go from Sydney absolutely hating and despising Gale, punching her in the face, you know. I mean, who wouldn't? Her mom's been dead less than a year. She wrote a book about it. She's trying to get the murderer acquitted. Um, it's kind of heavy when you think about it, you know. It's like, this is kind of a fucked up person. And the when Cindy kind of starts to realize maybe Cotton didn't do it, and she talks to Gale about it, um, and Gale's like, you get a innocent man off a death row. Do you know what that could do for my book sales? That's like, I love that part. So, because Kenny kind of like starts to smile, like, well, maybe she is a human being.
Yeah.
And then she says that, and he's like, oh. this bitch.
And
and
the relationship with Kitty and her is also great.
I love it so much. But
Please
I just
interpret that as move your fat, double
that's
lard ass now.
I love that line, that whole bit so much. But it's just so it's it's great. It's like, yeah, it goes from that where she hates her and then she starts to doubt it and maybe believe what Gail's trying to say about
Mhm.
Cotton. And then at the end, they come together, they, defeat and do it together. It's
Yeah.
it's great, and then in the next movie they fucking hate each other again.
Hmm. Weird how that works.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they had to scramble because this was really successful.
Yep.
Um, Last thing that I think we should talk about before we get out of here is Tatum, because she is also fucking great in this movie. Usually the friends are kind
Absolutely.
of, just kind of there. But it doesn't feel like that with her character. It feels like they give her things to do that mean something, and they make her interesting. And she's fodder, but they give her enough in the film that when it gets there, you're like, oh.
Yeah, and
And
even my 10,000,000th watch of this movie, I'm like, this time can Tatum live? I'm like, let's just have it one time because I love her.
and I would be remiss if I didn't mention her nipples because
Oh yeah.
that's a selling point. uh, so Rose McGowan is a very interesting actor in the sense that um, she commands the screen when she's on it, and
Yeah.
in pretty much everything that she's in, and a film that I found after this film that I believe was made before this film. It's called The Doom Generation. Fucking incredible in that movie. If you haven't seen The Doom Generation, check out The Doom Generation. It's fucking great.
I have to check it
Um,
out.
but it just her performance as Tatum balances everything out and again adds to that comedy without detracting from the horror. And when it's time for her to be involved in serious horror, it's serious. And that sequence is tremendous. It ended up in both of our top fives in the
Yeah.
kill list because it's just unique. Um, yeah, I love this movie a lot. Let's get into
It's a good one.
Reapers, or I'm sorry, Ghoulies. Let's get into Ghoulies for this and get out of here. What did you come in with in terms of
All right.
Ghoulies for Scream?
For Wes Craven's Scream, I think this movie is a masterpiece. Okay. I love it. I've always loved, like I said, watched it when I was 5. It's always been part of, I've always, I never get tired of watching it. Even when I watch it now, like when I watched it for this episode, seeing things that I never picked up for, which is good. That'll eventually run, obviously. But the opening scene is incredible. It still gives me chills. It still like creeps me out. I just think about being at home alone and that shit like I'm always scared when I'm here alone and I'm like in bed and I hear I like my dog makes noises when she's here, like she's really loud. And I'm like, and I know it's her, but I'm like, God damn it, there's somebody fucking downstairs. And it just makes me, that's what it makes me think of shit like that. And it also the aspect that this takes place in high school and the two killers are high schoolers. So when I was in school, I knew some people that I'm like, those guys would fucking do some shit like this. And and I live somewhere where unfortunately we had a couple high schoolers murdered a girl and it makes me think of that. While it is kind of a little fetch, something like this could potentially happen. Maybe not in the same way and stuff, but like, and it does happen. I mean, school shootings and shit happen. But everything about this movie I just love. All right, 5 out of 5.
I'm not mad at that 5. I can't not give it a 5 either, because I am giving it 5 out of 5 as well. I don't like throwing out 5 or ghoulies, just because I feel like a movie should have to earn it. But this movie completely earns it. I think that, again, and I've tried to illustrate this through the course of this fucking review, this was a movie that hit exactly at the right time, with everything kind of going on outside of the world. The lull in the slasher genre, this kind of pop culture centric dialogue that was really popular at the time. All of these things worked as a perfect storm for something like this to come along and reinvigorate the genre. And that's absolutely what it did. It was a fucking lightning bolt of a movie that hit exactly in the right spot. And there's not been anything remotely like it in a very long time, which is why we're still getting every couple of years them trudging this character back out, because it's easy to just play off of that nostalgia. And that's what this new trilogy of films is absolutely doing. It's playing off the nostalgia of these films, and of this film specifically, and just trying to replicate that. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but we'll get into what's wrong with it in future fucking reviews. We are going to get out of here, but before we do, we were going to point you in the direction of where you could find the show and socials and stuff. So if you want to find out more about the Ghoul Kids Table, you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can start by liking us on Facebook, facebook.com/Ghoul Kids Table, following us on Twitter at Ghoul Kids Table, on Instagram at GKT Podcast, and on the Tick'em Talks at Ghoul_Kids_Table. Andrew, where can they follow you?
Y'all can follow me on TikTok for the time being until, the ban. At Andrew Horror 31. Instagram, Andrew Horror. I don't know if there's a 31 or not. I can't remember all the ones I have 31 on. YouTube, Andrew Horror. And I think that's it. Oh, Letterboxd, if you want to.
Yeah, you want.
Rankings.
You fucking
stuff.
want it. You want it, goddammit. Pick that fucking letterbox.
I do post on Twitter too sometimes, but
we're gonna aggressively get people to follow you. Before this fucking franchise is done, we're going to make sure that people will follow you, or fucking fear that we're gonna be racing around in Ghostface costumes outside their houses.
Oh my god.
Football player boyfriends. but we will be back next week with our look at Scream 2, so you have that to look forward to. But until next time, for Andrew Horror and for myself, again, my name is Chunky. This has been another episode of the Ghoul Kids Table Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. There's always a seat available for you here at the table. Good night, folks.